Welcome to Native Exiles, Alderwood Community Church's podcast, where we talk about following Jesus and the tension of being in the world but not of it. And we are continuing on in our little mini-series here, looking at different schooling options for kids and how we can make the right choice for where we send our kids for school. And today we're talking with Tiffany Lavoie. Tiffany is the Director of Educational Support Services at Northwest Christian School in Colbert, Washington, just outside of Spokane. But we're actually not talking primarily today about private school, which is where Tiffany is today. We're talking about homeschool, and Tiffany homeschooled each of her 8 kids at different points in their lives and has just so much wisdom about homeschooling and why to choose homeschooling and if it's the right choice for you as a parent, if it's the right choice for you as a kid. We had a great conversation. Whether you are interested in homeschooling or really just don't have any context for homeschooling, I think you're going to find this to be a really engaging conversation. Let's jump into it. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, so can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing right now, and then we can jump into your journey with homeschooling.
Sure. Well, I'm currently the Director of Educational Support Services at Northwest Christian Schools in Colbert, Washington. And basically, that is a special education department within our private school. And I also teach math for 7th through 12th graders. I teach 7th grade math, pre-algebra, algebra, and geometry, all the great things you remember from high school. And then in partner with that, I support our kids who have learning differences on campus and partner with their families.
That's awesome. So you're in a private school setting right now, but we're actually talking today about homeschooling. We've been in kind of a series talking about parenting in general, but within that, we're really diving into different schooling options for parents right now. And it's just one of the huge decisions that every parent has to make is what I'm going to do for schooling, what's it going to look like, where are they going to go, how's the public school in my backyard, what do I know about the teachers and the principals and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm personally in that spot right now of a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old that my 5-year-old's gonna be starting kindergarten in the fall. And so we're there, and so many parents are there right now. So I'm excited to talk to you about homeschooling option. And you chose to homeschool your kids. Can you tell us just a little bit about your journey in becoming a homeschool parent?
Yeah, I started homeschooling in 99, 2000 when it was very new in California. It was not as nearly as popular at that time as it is now. It was very commonplace. You were considered to be a bit rebellious if you opted to homeschool your children in those days. But it was, for me, I felt like the best option for my family, but there's a lot of things to consider. So I started homeschooling my oldest, and then I homeschooled my second oldest, which was Hannah. And through that journey of learning about homeschooling, learning about teaching them, for some of my younger ones, we opted to do more of a hybrid option. So as we grew into homeschooling and we learned more about it and we built community with other homeschoolers, we sort of discovered that there's a lot of different ways to homeschool. There's a lot of different reasons to homeschool. And so our journey was not linear at all.
So for people who aren't familiar, what's the difference between pure homeschooling and a hybrid home? What does that mean?
Well, so in California, it was a little bit different. Washington has a little more rigorous guidelines around homeschooling than California does. It certainly did at the time, and even now, still Washington is considered one of the more rigorous states, which I think is excellent, that there's some guidelines put around to make sure that students are getting the education that they need. So traditional homeschooling is that you source your own curriculum, you develop your own scope and sequence, you figure out what your children are going to be studying and everything they're going to cover in the year, and you are sort of the whole kit and caboodle. You teach, you do everything. A hybrid approach can look different. You can be part-time and partnering within a public school setting, and they allowed you to take a few classes within a public school setting, particularly like for high school, and then you can participate in sports or you can participate in drama. There's some hybrid options for that. There's online options now where kids can be online but still be part underneath a school district and participate in social activities. And then there's also hybrid options where it's kind of out of the box, where you're buying curriculum, you're online, someone's building the program for you so that you make sure that you're meeting state standards. So now there is a variety of ways to choose to homeschool, where back in the day, everybody bought a Becca curriculum and we all followed the curriculum that we could find. And over the years, I found that I wasn't really satisfied with a lot of it. So I started writing some of my own curriculum and creating some of my own tools, and then kind of opened up a little sort of co-op we call it academy within that, so that I could support. I realized that my real love was teaching math. That's how I ended up what I'm doing now. That was developed through my homeschool years of learning that I loved teaching. And there's a lot of families who needed support and needed resources, and math was not their strong suit and not their lane. And so we ended up kind of working together, and the moms that were good at art taught art, and the moms that were great at literature and poetry, did classes on that, and I could do the math and the sciences, and we figured out that we could provide a well-rounded education, but do it in a way that worked within, the guise of homeschool, but it was more of a kind of a little school approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So did you always know that homeschooling was something that you wanted to do, or how did you get to the point of deciding to go down this path?
That's an excellent question. No, I never imagined that I would homeschool my kids. I kind of thought that my kids would go to traditional school. But the year that I was expecting my oldest son, who's 28 now, was the first I heard of homeschoolers. And I said, you can't do that. That's not legal. And people said, well, actually, you can. Under the law, you can. They can't make you send your kid to school. And I started reading up on it. I was literally expecting him. And I just thought, this is fascinating to me. And I didn't know that I would ever be able to afford private school tuition for my family. And so I just started kind of thinking that through. And the more I read into it, the more I found the advantages of it. Um, by the time he was preschool age, I was completely committed that
Yeah.
we would homeschool. But I didn't have a lot of friends and family at that point that were homeschooling. My sister homeschooled, but I didn't know a lot of people. And in those days, it was kind of a stigma that you were sort of breaking the rules.
Yeah. What were those advantages that were so attractive to you?
Um, at that time, it was really about, for me, and we had a larger family, right? So when my son was starting kindergarten, at that point, I had four little ones at home. I think I was expecting my fifth at that point, and time and proximity was a valuable commodity to me. To have one-to-one time, to have time to read books, time to go to the park, time to be part of his day, and the idea of sending him off somewhere for the majority of his awake hours was really hard for me to sort
Yeah.
of process. Now it changed over the years. I grew in wisdom as to the advantages and the disadvantages. The advantages, for sure, in my mind, were time and proximity. What I did not anticipate was the depth of commitment
Hmm.
and rigor and exhaustion that would come from homeschooling, and the commitment to doing it well and being committed to their education and to making sure that standards were met. And as they got a little older, second and third grade, I realized I wanted them to be prepared if I needed to put them into a school, that they consistently were on level with their peers so that they could make that transition without me causing them unnecessary anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so that became a really high standard for me. And when you have several little ones, that's a tough target to hit.
Yeah. I mean, for people who have never done this, never maybe even researched it,
Yeah.
help us wrap our minds around the rigor that you're talking about the like, what is the workload for deciding that you're going to be the homeschool parent for your kids?
Sure. And I don't want the workload to scare anyone off, because it's a beautiful experience if you choose to take it. But homeschooling is not for everyone. It's just not. It takes a disciplined, organized person who is a planner by nature. If
Hmm.
you're a planner by nature, then you are probably well equipped to homeschool. And I'll caution that by saying we have to be careful in the church community and in part of our body of believers that we can kind of raise the standard that homeschooling is the gold standard, and that somehow it's not enough if you choose not to homeschool. So I want to preface this by saying there are so many great options for education that are excellent for your children and are good for your family and good for all of the things that you need in your home. Homeschooling is researching the curriculum, researching the way your child learns. Not every child learns the same. And in a classroom, I'm going to differentiate my instruction. I'm going to make sure that in the way that I'm communicating it, I'm reaching the child that is auditory. I'm reaching the child that is visual. I'm reaching the child that needs to do it hands-on. I'm reaching the child who needs to move more. I'm reaching the child that just gets mentally and exhausted by extended periods of time, right? So in a classroom, I learn my students and I build my learning model. You have to learn your little learner, and you have to study them, and you have to figure out what makes them light up and what makes them engage and get excited about learning and want to pursue learning and not have them shut down. So you're going to invest in some curriculum and you're going to be super excited about it. And you're going to set up all the charts and all the books and all the things. And then your little one's not going to like it. And they're not going to learn that way. And they're going to get frustrated, and it's going to create friction. And trying to teach a child to read is a serious commitment, right? And to teach them to love to read, not just read, but love to read and love to write and love to hear and learn God's word and see it in science and see it in math and see it in poetry and literature and all the things. Very few people are good at all of the things, right?
Yeah.
So as you're a homeschool parent, particularly if you're a homeschool parent of more than one, it can be a real challenge to find ways to do that uniquely, that a child doesn't feel like they're just sitting in the corner with a bunch of worksheets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so homeschooling should not be your child just carrying around a clipboard while you run errands all day. Homeschooling is a commitment to educate them in a setting to which they can thrive. And so now, are there days that homeschooling involves going to Target and running to the dentist and doing all those things? Of course, that's life, right? But the majority of the time has to be in an environment that you curate, right? That you create, that allows this little one to just love to learn. And over the years of counseling a lot of parents and a lot of friends and a lot of people in moms groups, I have found that if you are by nature not one who is sort of flexible and can think on your feet, as well as really plan ahead and manage your time well, homeschooling may feel like a big lift.
Yeah.
And our children should not perceive our homeschooling them or educating them as a heavy lift. It should be perceived from them like a genuine joy.
Hmm.
And so when you have reading time with your little one at night, it shouldn't be like, oh, okay, it's fine, let's sit down, let's read. Right? No. And so when I was teaching my little ones to read, my kids got 15 to 20 minutes while I was making dinner. I would pop them all up on the kitchen counter to sit up there, and they each took a turn reading me whatever book we were reading for 15 to 20 minutes every night.
Hmm.
And I was chopping veggies and prepping dinner, but in their eyes, I was like, oh, tell me more. I can't turn the page. I can't wait to hear what's happening. Was I tired? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reality is they have to perceive that I can't wait for the next word.
Yeah. That's
Does
really
that make
good.
sense? So the heart
Absolutely.
of homeschooling has to create an atmosphere like a classroom where you have a cheerful, happy teacher ready to greet you and meet you and celebrate the wins and kind of drag you through the challenges and keep you going.
Yeah.
And homeschool parents can't quit. It's not an option not to do the math. It's not an option not to do the dissections. You have to commit to the whole thing, or you commit to a hybrid approach where you can partner with people who can
Yeah.
help you fill in the gaps that are not your strength, and that's completely acceptable. But you have to be realistic about what you really will excel in and the areas that you got to let go.
Yeah. I'm curious. Did you find homeschooling to be more efficient than what happens in maybe a public school setting or a private school setting? I mean, I was curious talking to parents um, during the pandemic when everything went,
Mhm.
asynchronous and, uh, Zoom classes or whatever. And they were like, our kids are getting all the work of a school day done in 2 hours now.
Yeah.
What are we doing the rest of the day when we send
Yeah.
them to class? I mean, was that your experience?
Well, yes, but there is a misconception about the pandemic and the effectiveness of how the time was used, because as we see the significant learning loss that happened, and students are in a massive deficit because they didn't get the game time, they didn't get the engagement, they didn't get the review days, they got the grind of a worksheet,
Yeah.
right? And so what we have found is I've got students who were our Christian school was unique in that we stayed open, and kids had 1 day a week they didn't come so we could rotate groups, but they stayed. And kids that we get from outside of our system, they're 2 years behind,
Hmm.
and it's significant. So I preface by saying, yes, it's more efficient, but we have to be careful about time commodity versus um, effectiveness. So I'll give you a good example. My son is my youngest son. Nicholas was an extremely efficient homeschooler. That child loves a good schedule. I would lay out his entire week for him, and he would thrive on the fact that he could be done with school on Wednesday by the end of the day, and he could have Thursday, Friday to play.
Yeah.
And he was about it. He had his math done, his science done, he did his labs, he had everything turned in. But it wasn't just a matter of the work, right? We did a lot of exploratory things, and we did some crafts, and we did a lot of that hands-on stuff. And he was in junior high, but he loved a good schedule that he could just knock out. And that has carried through to him. He's now in his PhD program doing the same thing. He's just
Yeah.
like clockwork, just clockwork. And so I think for a lot of families, it is more efficient because you can go to gymnastic classes in the middle of the day and do PE. You can knock out your doctor's appointments when it's, it's not as busy. And then you can go home and enjoy homework. What would be homework time for most people, you're doing your work into the evening as you have dinner, and then you're done. Right.
Yeah.
So most days we finished school as a homeschooler with junior hires. I had elementary, junior high, and high school all in one season, all at once. And we were done by 2. I mean, done, like packed up, put away, we were done by 2. But I started them at 8 o'clock in the morning. We started like a normal school day. We got up, we brushed our teeth, we got dressed, we had our devotions together, and then it was school time. It wasn't sort of a lagging start of when everyone got around to it. I always wanted to keep my kids on a disciplined schedule of getting up and starting their day and making their bed and getting, all the things, because I felt like if they had to transition into school, if we decided next year there was an excellent teacher and we wanted them to have the opportunity, I didn't want lazy, kind of habits that didn't necessarily suit them in a traditional schedule. So we did maintain that. I'm unique to homeschoolers. Not everyone, does that, but many days we did a 2 o'clock finish, and many weeks we were done on Friday. If they were about their business, and I have one child who could never get it done, and he did homework for the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. You said that, homeschooling is not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's clear you have to be a planner, like what you talked about. How academically gifted do you have to be? I mean, do you have to be a straight A student to be able to be an effective homeschool parent?
No, and particularly now in the world of technology, you don't even have to teach all the things. You just have to be a great person who pursues resources. And so when I started my journey to teach math, I started my journey because I was teaching my children. And I went, oh, wow, I'd forgotten that. Okay. And I started brushing up on the content. And then I brushed up on a little bit more. And then I stayed a few weeks ahead of them, and then realized I wasn't going to buy the algebra videos anymore. I was just going to teach it to them because I had retaught myself, all the material. Could I pick up an algebra book in 2000 when I started homeschooling my son and teach polynomials? Nope. But it's amazing when it comes back, after all these years. You do not have to be a straight A student. You do not actually, I mean, honestly, with YouTube and the resources that are free out there right now, every math and science lesson is available to you in a free format that you could sit alongside your student, listen to it, help them, take guided notes. You can order from sciencetools.com, I believe is what it's called. I ordered sharks, squid, we did cow brains, frogs, cricket. I ordered all of the things, and it comes with a full packet with the whole diagram of how you dissect it, what you do, how you label it, all the part. I didn't have to, I just sat alongside when they did it and made sure they didn't leave too many guts in my kitchen, but they loved it. My kids loved dissections. And so there's so many cool kits out there that you can get to do that. And you don't have to be an expert in the field. Now, math, science, you've got to be diligent to find good resources. You've got to be diligent to find good instructional videos. Kids need to be proficient, right? But there's so much exploratory opportunities that can be so fun for them. And it doesn't have to feel like you don't have to sit down and do a lecture. In homeschool, there's no parent that sits and does a lecture. It's more about exploring with them. So if you're curious by nature and you enjoy researching and getting organized and collecting information, you'll love it. And honestly, I felt like I learned more as a homeschool mom than I probably did the first time I did it in school. And I was a great student, but there's something about doing as an adult, and there's something about exploring, learning, and the world and science as an older believer that gives you a view of the world that and God, creator and heavenly father, that there's just something really cool about it.
Yeah, that's cool. We talked a little bit about what you need to be as a parent for it to be right for you.
Yeah.
What about as the kids? Do you think every kid is right for homeschool? And even just with your own kids, were there any kids that you decided to do other options for?
Sure. And it varied for us by the year. My oldest son was not a great homeschooler. He did not enjoy it. And it's interesting, he was my first, and he really taught me the ropes to finding other options because he fought me every step of the way. He was not he was not my most cooperative child. And but he school was not his thing, right? So you have to learn when you have a student who in his particular case had attention deficit, right? And had difficulties with focus and was a bit rebellious by nature. He was just a tough kid who, if you put a line down, he said, cool, let me cross that one. Let's see what happens. I just kind of want to know.
Mhm.
And so we did homeschool, we did private school. We even tempted for a part of a year. He wanted to try the local public high school. He wanted to be part of the drum corps and the marching band and all of that. And I was always willing to give my kids options to try other things. We ended up graduating him from high school as a homeschooler. He did a co-op, and that was the ticket. He loved the different teachers, but he loved the smaller setting. He had a really good friend group, and he ended up graduating, and that was successful for him. We had years that we homeschooled. We had years that all five went to a little private school in our community because it really fit. Some of the years I taught there. We had some years that 2 or 3 homeschooled and 3 went in school. We did high school as a full-time for some, hybrid for others. Like I'm not,
Mhm.
I feel like you have to figure out what's best for your child and what's best for your family, best for your finances. But you also have to consider as the adult in the family, best for your sort of mental health. Trying to homeschool when there's too many other things going on and life is full and busy isn't best. And so, as beautiful as homeschooling is, you really have to be cognizant of making sure that you're not impacting your relationship as parent to fight them to do their schoolwork, because that is a lifelong relationship you don't want to impact with negativity. And so, for some kids, homeschool is not best for them. I have parents who come here to our school to meet with me. They've been homeschooling. They're fighting their child every day. They're frustrated. That you can see it on the kid's face.
Yeah.
They're frustrated and they hate school. And I have to sit down with them and say, let us help, right? Bring them here. Let me see what I can do and let's get them plugged in. And they thrive here at school. They're doing beautifully. If you have a child that has learning differences, if you have a diagnosed or undiagnosed disability, you may not be the best educator for that child. They may need a really specialized education. Um, it's heartbreaking to me. I have a student right now who's come to me who hasn't done math for like 3 years because they homeschooled, and he fought his mom and
Mhm.
fought and fought and fought and wouldn't do it and wouldn't do it. So she just skipped it.
Yeah.
How do you think that's working out in 7th grade?
Yeah.
It's tough, right? And so we had other parents who just said through COVID, they just refused to do their work. They shut down. They wouldn't do the online learning. They were miserable. And now we have kids in a significant deficit. If that's your child, you've got other things to work through with them. You've got other priorities in order to capture their heart and to train them up. I don't think homeschooling is the necessarily the only way to do that. And some want time and proximity, as I talked about. They feel like if I'm just with them more, then we'll have a better relationship. But is it possible that there's too much friction being created in homeschooling and now they're not hearing anything you're saying?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's better to just prioritize being parent and being mom and being the nurturer when they come home from a rough day at school and being there for them, rather than being the one going, where's your packet? Where's your science? Where's your English? Get your room cleaned, get your laundry done. And all day long, they feel like you're just kind of on them. Homeschooling can be a real tense situation if everybody's not on the same page. So it's important to really know your student. And I work with kids with special needs, and that's my specialty area and my degree. I caution parents, if you know your child is struggling to learn to read, if you suspect dyslexia, if you suspect ADHD, dysgraphia, there's a lot that I see every day. You don't necessarily, it's not that you can't homeschool them, but you really need to pull in some resources to support you while you homeschool.
Yeah. That's good.
Don't feel like the public school is the big bad guy, because the public school can be your ally. You have a right as a homeschooler to still have an IEP done. You still can have assessments done and testing done, and they can create that for you. You still qualify. You're a tax-paying citizen in the state of Washington. You can still go and have occupational therapy. There's things that they can do for you. It doesn't matter what a school you attend. It matters that your child gets the support they need, and it's free.
Yeah,
And free is really great.
that is great. Yeah. I think as parents weigh the options and consider homeschool, I think for many parents, uh, one of the downsides they see with homeschool, whether it's real or imagined, is that it's harder for kids to grow social skills in a
Mm,
homeschool environment and,
sure.
learn to be a part of peer groups and all of that. Is that how big of a problem is that in reality? What did you experience with your kids?
Well, I think there's two different approaches. So, my children used to joke, we're homeschooled, we're not homeschoolers.
That's good.
So Hannah and her brothers would always say, we're homeschooled, we're not homeschoolers. So there is a stigma about some kids who have not been socialized well. But there is some really simple solutions to that. And church is the biggest one.
Hmm.
If the doors were open, my children were in church, literally. If it was Sunday, Sunday night, Wednesday, youth group, it started in fourth and fifth grade. They had this wonderful thing called the Mocha Club, and they loved to go there. They had even the adult things that were going on. If my children participated socially in church, that's all they need. Learn to take social cues, learn to make sure your children are paying attention within a group setting. Are they being kind? Are they being polite? Are they annoying someone? Ask leaders, are my children integrating in appropriately? Is there something that we need to work with them on at home? Be willing to take constructive criticism about your children. And my biggest um, sort of tool for that was to make sure that each one of my children uniquely had a mentor in their life outside of me and outside of my husband, to make sure that there was somebody in the church that could mentor my children, that could give them hard information and have critical conversations with them. But it wasn't separate from me, it was in partnership with me, so that we could talk about things that we needed to. And I think that's really important for homeschoolers, because they can feel like they have no one to talk to, because their only adults are their parents. And they need a youth pastor. They need a teacher at Sunday school. They need a mentor at church who they can share hard things with, who maybe help them bridge the conversation with their parents, because some of those conversations are tough. But I think those are the social skills that they really need. And so if a student is playing sports, if a student is in community theater, if a student is doing gymnastics, if they're doing church, I don't think they need any. I don't think school in itself is magic. Peer pressure is good. Hard conversations with your peers is important to learn. That's a life skill you have to learn. And so we don't want to shelter our kids to where they don't know how to communicate with their peers. But I think protecting them with a group of safe, good people to grow up with is what God calls us to do. We're
Yeah.
supposed to protect children. We're not supposed to throw them to the wolves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. I think another concern, and we talked about this a little bit with just, how you don't have to be good at everything as the homeschool teacher. You don't have to be a great,
Yes.
mathematician necessarily or
Yes.
whatever. But another concern is just, especially with the older ages, high school in
Right.
particular, is am I going to be able to prepare my kids for the next level of education? Am I going to be able to, have them come into a college experience at the same level as somebody who, especially if it's a gifted kid,
Mhm.
am I
Sure.
going to be able to do something that could compete with, the
Right.
AP classes that a public school is offering or something like
Yeah.
that? And, you already said one of your sons is in a PhD program, so it seems like at least for him, you figured it out. But what would
I
you say to
worked.
parents who have that concern?
I think that's a great question. And I think that's where you become a good researcher. So in Washington State has a fantastic option for Running Start,
Hmm.
a free option for kids to start college credit as juniors. It's free. Go get it. Go get it
Even for
done.
homeschool kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You can join Running Start and transfer into that program and take classes and have dual credit for high school and for college. They basically start college as high schoolers, right? And if you're like, well, I don't really want my kid to go to the college and take a class, I'm not comfortable with them doing that. Okay. Then, there's schools like, there's a lot of our major universities that do dual credit for high schoolers. So, my youngest daughter did Grand Canyon University's dual credit program. So she took her high school level English as a junior, and her psychology and her history and a bunch of different classes. So her junior and high school year, she did a couple classes at our local Christian school so that she could be part of cheer and activities and things. The rest of her classes were all done online through the university, and she got dual high school and college credits. So that when she graduated high school, they're a fraction of the cost. A college credit may be $12, $15, $2,000 a credit. We paid $300, right?
Yeah.
And she graduated with her AA done and transferred into the university. And so I didn't have to worry about teaching her advanced psych. She just took it at the college. So if a student shows promise, my son who's in his PhD program showed promise. I really urged him. He wanted to stay full-time homeschool, and I really had to kind of negotiate with him to try some classes at our local Christian school so that he could have a great chemistry teacher. He could have an AP calculus teacher, because that was not going to be my lane for him. And he ended up loving it and did a hybrid. He did 3 classes at school and then the rest, remotely with homeschool with me. But what we've found with my students integrating into the high school, well, I'll tell you the flip side is Hannah went to the local high school. I asked her to go just to try it for a semester. And after that, she came back to me and said, no, I'm far more efficient at home. I don't like the time wasted. I spend I feel my whole day here and I could have this done in half the time. I want to go back to homeschooling. And she went back to homeschooling and graduated as a full-time homeschooler. So it's not for everyone, right? For her, it made more sense to just stay a homeschooler. And so, but Hannah was so disciplined, she could sit in the coffee shop and actually read Beowulf and get through it. Whereas a lot of kids need a teacher to spoon feed it to them, And so I think that the flip side is if your student wants to take advanced classes and they're doing well, there's options. But there's also nothing wrong with preparing your student for a track that you can see that for your university is maybe not for them. That's just not something they're interested in. Maybe they want to get into the trades. Maybe there's something specific they want to do. And there's also internship programs that you could get your kid into as a high schooler to start to get some experience with that. That would be fantastic for them. And the community colleges have tracks where for very low cost or no cost as a homeschooler, as a high schooler, they could start getting exposed to some of those trades and get the experience to say, yeah, I really want to be a carpenter, or I want to be in metalwork or HVAC or whatever. I think we need to encourage more people that it's okay if that's not your lane and you want to do a trade. They make great money, and we need good people to do things that involve the trades, and we have a massive shortage, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have a son who went to the trades.
Yeah, that's so great. Tiffany, this has been really helpful. Thank you. I
Of course.
wonder if you could just leave us, if there's parents listening to this who maybe are thinking about this for the first time or reconsidering this because of what you've said, what would be, just the next step for a parent to take if they want to learn more, to want to figure out if it's something that's right for them? Where would you point somebody to pursue a homeschooling option?
Well, the state of Washington has resources. If you actually want to go forward with homeschooling, check that out, because you do need to file some forms to be a homeschooler. So you definitely want to make sure that you've done that in the proper time and file your notice that you're going to, withdraw your student. So make sure you do that legally. If you want more information, Homeschool Legal Defense is a great resource. They have a ton of information, and you can click actually on the state that you're in, and it gives you all the details of what you need to do to be qualified to be a homeschooler and how to register your student and what the laws are for you. But they have a ton of information in their newsletters. But it's a very, very inexpensive way if you want sort of some insurance, because sometimes school districts and things in life get difficult. The Homeschool Legal Defense is a great organization that protects the rights of homeschoolers. So I always paid my little nominal annual dues. I can't honestly tell you what they were, but they were very, very inexpensive, just to be, covered and comfortable that I had the legal right to homeschool all my kiddos and that they were not registered in our schools. And so they have a great resource. And then I would caution, if you want to be a homeschooler and you're nervous about it, get on social media and join some homeschool groups. There's some great resources in there that will help you kind of put your mind at ease, because a lot of people starting out feel like they have to be the Pinterest mom in order to be a homeschooler. And what you really have to have is a heart for your children and a love for your family. And the rest of it will come in time. You don't have to have it all figured out the first year. So just start to collect resources and trust in the Lord. If this is something that's on your heart, then just take one step at a time, and it will change over the years. It's certainly not linear, and that's okay. Your children change, and so will homeschooling.
It's a great word. Tiffany, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
That was Tiffany Lavoie, and I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. We'll throw some of those links that she mentioned into the show notes for this episode. And thanks for joining us in this series, Looking at School. It's been really eye-opening for me. I still have no idea what I'm going to do with my kids, but I hope it was helpful for you. We're going to figure it out in our family here in the next few months. But I just loved in this whole series coming to the understanding that, man, there's so many good options out there. God's at work in every context, in the public schools and the private schools and the homeschooling options as well. And so, really it's about using wisdom. And I hope that that God uses this in your life, for your families, for our churches as well. We'll talk to you soon. Join us next time for Native Exiles. See you then.